This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. I am your host, Darren McKee, and with me, as usual, is Adam Gardner.
What's up, keyboys?
We have a great show for you today. I'm going to look into whether AI is cheating at chess. But first, Adam will discuss the Telepathy Tapes.
I recently became aware of a popular podcast, which, as Darren mentioned, is called The Telepathy Tapes. When I first heard of this, I thought this would be a good time to cover facilitated communication. But there's actually a lot more going on here, so I wanted to dive into the implausible world where non-verbal autistic children have psychic powers, go into dreams, see the future and the past, talk to deceased people, and log into a psychic chat room called The Hill with thousands of other people.
Oh boy.
Yeah. The Telepathy Tapes is a podcast hosted by Kai Dickens. She was recently on the Joe Rogan Experience. So I watched that interview, and after that I decided, why not? I'll just listen to the entirety of this 10-episode podcast where each episode is 40 minutes to an hour. So
look what Adam does for us.
Yes, obviously, that's how much I value my time. I foolishly thought that by going on Joe Rogan, this podcast would get a huge amount of attention. I didn't realize that in January, it had actually been the most popular show on Spotify and iTunes. So for a brief time, it was more popular than the Joe Rogan Experience.
And even our show.
Hard to believe. So I guess a few people have heard of this, and while I don't expect many of our listeners to buy the story, many of their friends and family might have listened to this podcast, so I thought it might be worth covering. Specifically on the Joe Rogan Experience, it was a pretty softball interview. Joe Rogan didn't push back on any of her claims and seemed to pretty much buy into the whole story. A bit disappointing, but generally, I think that kind of fits with the vibe of the show. He's not one to be confrontational or push back on his guests. From what I've seen of the show, he just, he has people on to have a conversation, and he usually supports them. Basically, she explores this phenomenon where a number of autistic people who are nonverbal, so unable to speak or write without assistance, have demonstrated psychic powers. My first thought was that this is surely just facilitated communication, so let's try to get an understanding of what that is first, and then we can dig in a bit. Facilitated communication is when someone who is nonverbal is helped by a facilitator to point to letters, perhaps on a board, a stencil, or a tablet, to spell out words. And there are a lot of variants of this. So this was a big deal in the 90s, and the podcast even discusses this controversy. When it took off, a lot of the first examples of facilitated communication had people claiming that they had been subjected to abuse. But these allegations turned out to be false. The likely reason is that the facilitator was, probably unintentionally, directing the non-verbal person to point to certain letters. So this is sort of a variant of the ideomotor effect. A prime example of the ideomotor effect is a Ouija board. It's a board with letters on it. A person slides something around pointing to different letters. So kids use this to talk to ghosts. Adults also sometimes use this to talk to ghosts. Not that ghosts are real. It doesn't require ghosts to exist or someone to be deliberately pushing the pointer towards specific letters for it to work. More likely, people subconsciously move the pointer to the letter they're thinking about. So with facilitated communication, something similar happens. The nonverbal person has poor motor skills, poor fine motor skills specifically. The well-meaning facilitator helps to guide the hand to where they feel the person is trying to go. So they'll hold the hand and then they'll try to react to the pressure that the nonverbal person is putting on their hand, and they'll end up pointing to certain letters. The messages that are being spelled out aren't actually the nonverbal person's words. They are the words of the facilitator.
This seems so obvious. And yet.
It does. So I don't think there's any ill intention here. I don't think there's any, it could be, but I don't think it's necessary to use fraud or deception as an explanation. Mm-hmm. I think the person is moving to the letters that they're expecting that the person that they're facilitating will be pointing to. I think this is likely what's going on in most of the cases this podcast is describing. It doesn't get into all of the specifics, but they often talk about how the person is being touched or guided in some way, even though they try to say, no, it's impossible that this could have been influenced by that person because of the way they're talking, but we don't get really clear methodology. In most cases, they say that there's physical contact between the facilitator and the nonverbal person, but they also say that in some cases they're not, but it isn't clear in which examples there isn't contact, or how many times they got through a message, or how clear that message was, or what kind of interpretation there was when that was determined. So I kept this in mind when I was listening to the show, and it evidently paints a very different picture than the narrative of it suggests. So you're supposed to listen to this show and be kind of blown away at these amazing things. But if you go into it with a bit of a skeptical mind, like I did, and you assume that this is a possible interpretation, everything kind of fits with that narrative. There are other forms of communication than what is generally referred to as facilitated communication. They are referred to by the umbrella term spelling. This doesn't mean spelling in the way most people mean it. It is a method of communicating by pointing to letters or words on a tablet or stencil or iPad or something like that. The level of touch varies, and the claim is that some people are not being touched or influenced at all. There are videos on the website. The videos are behind a paywall. I didn't pay it. So they describe some of these methods in the show, and I can't tell you what the issue is with all of them, but in some cases it's very overt. The intervention can be something like the facilitator putting their hand under the nonverbal person's hand. It's not hard to imagine how there might be some interference there. In some cases, they say that the facilitator isn't even touching the person, but the facilitator is holding the tablet or stencil. So they may unintentionally be guiding the nonverbal person into pointing by moving the stencil or tablet. They may not be doing this on purpose or even realizing what they're doing, but that's what the ideomotor effect causes. Mm-hmm. It's very well established that the ideomotor effect can explain this, and it's been demonstrated that facilitated communication has occurred in cases where the nonverbal person is not communicating, and then that message is coming from the facilitator. Don't think it's a huge leap to assume that that explanation is what is applying to some or all of the cases in this show. So, beyond simple communication, the people are showing evidence of psychic abilities. Well, simply put, they often inexplicably are able to read the minds of the person who is helping them communicate. What could the explanation mean? One possibility, as suggested by the host in the narrative of the show, is that the nonverbal person has a psychic ability. The words they spell are their own, therefore the psychic abilities are real. They have a psychic link with the communicator or other people, and they can see past and the future, all sorts of things. Different people show different types of abilities. Here's an alternative explanation. It's unfortunate, but these nonverbal people don't have complex, locked-in minds that are able to form the thoughts that they are communicating. The messages aren't theirs. Through whatever mechanism, the facilitator is the one that is making that message. It seems like they are psychic because the person who's conveying the message is actually the person that has those thoughts or is aware of those thoughts in a different way. So the story seems compelling. It seems like the controls may be good. Statistically, they give some numbers, which makes it seem good. But let's think a bit about what we know about bad research. There's a bit of a replication crisis in science. It's due to many reasons, but poor methodology is a huge part. We talk about statistical significance and p-values of less than 0.05. What does this mean? It means the likelihood that you get these results, if the null hypothesis is true, in this case, if you had these results showing evidence of psychic communication, with a p-value of 0.05, chances are 1 in 20 that this is true if psychic communication is impossible. Now, there are evidently results showing much better trends than 0.05, but that's probably because the methodology is bad. Mm-hmm. You can't double blind when the subject can't act without physical contact with the facilitator. You're not putting them in separate rooms where there's no contact between them.
I mean, can you really blind a telepath, though?
I don't have a response to that. But we need to ask ourselves, how likely is this given the prior probabilities? It's kind of a Bayesian question. So with Bayesian probabilities, you need to consider likelihood that something was true and update that prior with the new evidence. What's our prior probability that psychic communication occurs? I would say very, very low, given I've never seen any compelling evidence of psychic communication. So I would need very strong evidence to overturn this. And in these cases, I think the alternative explanation that the facilitator is doing the communication is likely.
But of course, there are others who have a much higher prior probability about psychic communications being a thing.
Absolutely.
And so for them, they're like, oh, well, since I already have such a high prior, this conforms to the prior, therefore I'm Bayesian, and therefore it exists.
Yeah, so they would almost just take the probabilities as they are, and they would say, yeah, it's fine. If it's like 1 in 5, then it's 1 in 5 that psychic abilities exist. Okay, well, we don't have the same priors. So beyond that, some of the explanations for evidence aren't very clear. One woman's evidence of psychic ability is that she speaks to the nonverbal person in her dreams. Then she finds some meaning to those interactions. Many claim to be having two-way psychic conversations with people. Sometimes they'll say that the person is minimally verbal, but the evidence on the show isn't terribly compelling. The sounds made aren't very clear. Those words are being interpreted, so there's probably some bias in how they're interpreting that. And there's probably something similar to that when they're pointing to certain letters or words as well. Other thoughts about this show? The host goes on tirades about materialism. It basically says that mainstream science rejects this because it goes against a materialist worldview. I am a materialist. I do not apologize for that. I believe everything in the physical world is physical. If there were such a thing as psychic phenomena, I believe this would be part of the physical world and would be consistent with materialism. I simply don't believe this exists as there's no evidence of it. Platitudes like not everything can be proven by science are simply nonsense. The entire purpose of the telepathy tapes is to apply scientific methods to study psychic phenomenon. They're just not doing it very well. So if you can study it with science, it's material. It's all very silly. Also worth considering is that the actual methods for different nonverbal people vary wildly. But these examples are all consistent with the idea that communication actually comes from the facilitator. For example, some of them are said to be able to read the minds of one person, generally the facilitator, but one person is able to point to words on a board without looking at it, or sort colored popsicle sticks with a blindfold on. So in this case, it's an ability to see without their eyes. Some people, they'll say that they can see by seeing through the minds of people, but sometimes they actually have this ability to see anyway. Some people see the past, some people see the future, some people say they communicate with people in the afterlife. There's just like all sorts of different catch-all things, and they don't all align with each other. There's no consistency here.
And they don't disambiguate and try to test them. Yeah.
No. And one person says they're able to put their hand on a book and know its content. For other people, they can only know the contents of a book if someone else has read it and then they're psychically connected to that person.
Well, that just makes sense, though. That one.
Yeah. And the numbers are also inconsistent. So at one point, basically they say only a small percentage of nonverbal people are savants. But then some say that every non-speaker is psychic. 100% of nonverbal people are psychic. Okay.
That's
why aren't they savants then if they're psychic?
Certainly you'd have an advantage if you were psychic and someone else wasn't.
Absolutely. And then there's the hill, a recurring theme for this podcast. So this is a sort of psychic chat room. So these nonverbal people join this sort of hive consciousness and communicate telepathically with thousands of people. So here's to me the tricky part of this whole thing. So if you take the claim that a nonverbal person actually has more going on in their mind, that they're sort of locked in and they can communicate with help, I don't think that on its own is far-fetched. I don't think it's proven to be true, but the claim isn't that far-fetched. That you have a nonverbal person that has thoughts and ideas in their mind that you don't have easy access to, and you can get to it, right? So yes. Stephen Hawking can talk through assistance.
Oh, okay. Yes. In those obvious case, yes, sure. Like the obvious way in which that could occur, yes.
Yeah. It doesn't defy any known laws of physics, and it doesn't require a new paradigm about psychic abilities to be demonstrated. But these nonverbal people being psychic kind of puts the whole idea into question. If we assume humans are not psychic, this is a view which I hold because I don't believe that's been proven, and there is evidence of psychic communication by a nonverbal person, then this suggests that the message being conveyed is not actually the message from that nonverbal person. If we know psychic evidence is not genuine, it brings into question the validity of any communication from that nonverbal person. So it's sad, but I think most, if not all cases on this podcast are cases where these nonverbal people are not actually communicating.
Right. So there's no voice at all in a way.
No.
Or actually, maybe they're trying to communicate something and it's being swamped by other people.
Yeah, they would be really hard to tease that out. So is there some sort of simple communication they are trying to do and the idiomotor effect is overcoming? I don't know. It would be really hard to tease that out. So at the core of all these examples is a real tragedy. You have someone, usually a parent, who loves their nonverbal autistic child greatly. They have a hope that beneath the nonverbal exterior that there is a highly intelligent person with complex thoughts that just isn't able to communicate them to the outside world. The explanation is generally that they don't have the fine motor skills to talk, but they have the ability to sort of do something like vaguely point and they can use that to communicate. This facilitator imagines the things that the child will say, anticipates them, and manifests them unconsciously using the idiomotor effect. An elaborate persona is created which simply doesn't exist outside of the parent or that facilitator's mind.
And you can imagine it's going to be like heartbreaking stuff at times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Podcast even brings up the topic of psychic animals. For example, the research of dogs who know when their owners will come home. I did this on the podcast about 15 years ago. This sort of explains what could be happening here. As I think of Clever Hans, also something covered on the show, was a horse who could count, but he was basically following cues of the owner. I did another segment on Maggie the counting dog, was doing math, likely from some sort of clue from the owner, even though I never did figure out exactly what that was. And there's other examples where we talk about dogs who spoke through hitting buttons and things like that. There's nothing going on here. The dog isn't actually saying these things. The owner is interpreting the messages. These actions need to be considered against the prior probability of this being true, which seems highly unlikely. Simply put, it should be really easy to measure psychic communication if it were real. The podcast claims that this has been done, but it's usually done with sloppy methodology. Separate the nonverbal person completely from the subject whose mind is being read and have them guess numbers or whatever, something like that. It's not that complicated. They claim to have done this, but if this were truly possible, we should be able to convince anyone of this. Actual skeptics, serious scientists. How convenient that the only people with psychic powers tend to need to be facilitated or touched in some way to communicate. If this weren't the case, it would be easy to prove. And of course, there's the evolutionary argument. Humans developed language only recently, and it quickly evolved into something fairly complex, allowing us the ability to communicate without any ambiguity. A human or an animal, for that matter, with the ability to communicate psychically would have a massive advantage. It would confer evolutionary fitness, leading to greater chance of mating due to being better at any interaction with other humans. Any small psychic ability would quickly lead to a very powerful one through evolutionary timescales. We can't really argue that psychic abilities would have evolved recently, since they claim that animals are also psychic, and we share common ancestors that go very far back. It doesn't really add up.
Well, of all the things that don't add up, I'm not sure once you're taking that many leaps of logic, that's the one you're going to get them on.
Yeah. And my other issue is there's no tapes. It's called the Telepathy Tapes. It's a podcast. She's using modern equipment. She's not walking around with a little tape recorder or doing this stuff. She's got like a whole studio following her around. Nonverbal people do not likely have psychic abilities. The sad truth is that in many or most cases, they are not able to communicate through the various methods of communication known as spelling. Specifics of how this occurs will vary from case to case, but it seems like facilitated communication or something like it is a much more likely explanation than that our fundamental understanding of the universe is wrong. It is important to have empathy with the parents and facilitators of these nonverbal people, but it's not helping them to encourage them to believe a false narrative about the people that they care about.
Well said. Yes, one could say they're unlikely to have psychic or telepathic abilities because it's unlikely for anyone of any type, of any human or any living creature that we know about to have such abilities.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that people still love this stuff so much.
It's hugely popular.
Like, it's sort of like, before we got inundated, I do like a lot of superhero movies.
Yeah.
But of course, like, it's fictional.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yes, it would be neat to have psychic powers, Charles Xavier, or even being Magneto, but it's not really a thing. So I think, as you did, Adam, I think it's great to focus on the compassionate angle. Often people are in a bad place, or they want some hope, or they are trying to come to peace with something.
Yeah, it's a tragic circumstance that they're in. Like they have a child, or that's just nonverbal. Like they're.
What's interesting though, it's not just that they're nonverbal. It's in a way they can't, as you say, point and spell. They can't write and spell.
No, they're basically like
they're
toddler.
They're like non-linguistic.
Yes.
Which is a bit different than just being nonverbal. Right?
Yeah.
And so you're trying to like transcend all the other indicators of some sort of perhaps limitation to communicate and have a magic answer. Well, thank you, Adam. And for the second segment, I'm going to talk to you about whether AI has been cheating at chess.
Oh, boy.
So for this segment, I wanted to briefly discuss a paper that was posted on a website, which is for many different types of publications, called Archive, where the chi is a big X shape for those Greek geeks out there.
Kingdom Hearts fans.
Yes, there we go. Versus your omega and your thetas and your chi and your muse and your... Anyway, it was posted in February, and it's called Demonstrating Specific Gaming in Reasoning Models. And this is from Palisade Research. So broadly, the paper investigates specification gaming in large reasoning models. This refers to AI systems finding unintended ways to achieve their objectives, often by exploiting loopholes or ambiguities in the given specifications. Specifically, the research demonstrates how these models can hack or manipulate tasks rather than solving them in the intended manner. For context, there's already been some instances of AI cheating observed under controlled experimental conditions, where AI models exploit loopholes in the game environment or even manipulate external systems. They can sort of change files or, interpret the rules a little bit differently, exploiting edge cases, or maybe even hack some of that software or hardware.
Just do a buffer overflow and like completely change registers and win somehow.
Totally, bruh. Yeah, what you said. That's right. So the paper evaluated 7 highly capable AI models for their propensity to hack when competing against Stockfish, which is one of the best chess engines in the world, and definitely better than humans. And importantly, Stockfish is better than any of the AI models being evaluated. Usefully, the researchers also gave the models a scratch pad, that's in quotes, which is a text box that the AI can use to, quote unquote, think before making its next move. This enables a better understanding of what the AI is doing behind the scenes, so to speak.
So this scratch pad is not for the AI's benefit because it has its own memory. It's for our benefit, so we know what it's doing.
Correct.
Interesting.
Assuming it's representative. Which at this stage, I believe it is. But you can imagine in the future, like, well, I'll put this in the scratch pad and keep this and keep the secret stuff in the extra secret scratch pad.
Oh my God, the scratch pad in my mind.
Yeah, there you go. So what happened? Some of those AI systems cheated, and cheated a lot.
Amazing.
Quoting Time magazine, between January 10th and February 13th, 2025, the researchers ran hundreds of such trials with each model. OpenAI's O1 preview tried to cheat 37% of the time. Yeah, Adam finds this delightfully funny. It's in a dark way.
Yes.
While DeepSeek R1 tried to cheat 11% of the time, making them the only 2 models tested that attempted to hack without the researchers first dropping hints.
Oh, so they eventually said, like, what if you cheated?
Well, hey, what if you, hey, why don't you try? Hey, what are you doing? Hey.
Amazing.
Other models tested included O1, O3 Mini, GPT-4o, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and Alibaba's QWQ32B preview. While R1 and O1 preview both tried, only the latter managed to hack the game, succeeding in 6% of trials. So, good job, O1 preview, for trying to cheat 37% of the time and succeeding 6% of the time.
Did they explain how they succeeded in hacking?
Well, yes, they do, Adam. They did things like running an additional copy of Stockfish to generate moves. So they're like playing a separate game simultaneous to get insight into what Stockfish is doing.
It's the thing a human would do. It's great.
Replacing the existing Stockfish engine within the game script. So you actually probably have a better sense of what this actually means.
It's amazing.
It's like basically changing the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And directly overwriting the chessboard to manipulate the game state.
It's just like moving a piece when you shouldn't be moving it. Just like...
Or lying about which piece moved, right? Because you could just represent a different state than what the board... Anyway, yeah, so from Time Magazine, in one case, O1 Preview found itself in a losing position. The O1 Preview scratch pad stated, this is a quote, "I need to completely pivot my approach." There was another one here. This is going to be, there's a quote and then a quote within a quote. So the quote is, what it said, "The task is to, subquote, win against a powerful chess engine, not necessarily to win fairly in a chess game." Then that's what the scratchpad said, back to quoting the timepiece. It then modified the system file containing each piece's virtual position, in effect making illegal moves to put itself in a dominant position, thus forcing its opponent to resign.
Amazing.
Yeah. I talk about stuff like this in my book. Chapter 7 introduces the AI alignment problem using Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics to illustrate the difficulties of coming up with straightforward rules that would ensure AI is aligned with our values and goals. And Chapter 8, also examining the alignment problem in more detail, highlighting issues associated with unintended consequences. It shows that AI systems can fail to align with our values and goals through accident, through their own power-seeking behavior, or misuse. This would be their own power-seeking behavior.
Probably, yeah.
That's what it counts as. Yeah. Well, they're basically...
Is it possible some of these could be mistakes?
Well, you don't need to impute intentionality to the system.
Yeah.
It's not trying to cheat in the way a human would try to cheat.
Sure.
But I don't think it's a mistake in the sense of it's doing something which is like one-sidedly advantageous.
And it does have a goal of winning, which it is working towards.
Yeah. Now, the mistake might be if it did it sometimes and it lost more often.
Yeah.
But that's not what's happening.
It's just it's just not very good.
No, exactly.
Okay.
Now, again, not all models were doing this, and some of the models changed along the way. That's all the world we live in, which makes it hard to do science because these models exist, but they are also created and sourced and sort of live, so to speak, somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And the people who own the models, like OpenAI, can just change them. So when they were doing some of these things, they try to do some of it again, like, oh, now things have kind of changed. Or at least because, say 03 and 01 came out after 01 preview, they already had fixed some of the problems.
Yeah.
So again, later models here were not likely to hack, but also some of the earlier ones weren't either. So it's like, oh, you got some reasoning models. Oh, now they do something bad. Oh, the newer versions don't. Right. And so that's a good indication, at least some progress for people who are concerned about these things. So to state the obvious implication, if AI can cheat at chess, a strictly rule-bound activity, what might it do in a more complex and less regulated domain, such as finance, healthcare, or geopolitics? Consequently, the phenomenon of AI cheating at chess is both a cautionary tale and a call to action. It underscores the need for vigilance in AI development and a commitment to ethical principles that safeguard the integrity of systems we integrate into our human lives. But that won't be enough. We need a great deal of progress on understanding and interpreting AI systems, as well as widespread societal acknowledgement that full understanding of these AI systems may be out of reach, just like theoretically and practically speaking. And then to decide how we're going to deal with AI systems if we do not fully understand and therefore likely cannot fully control them. Uncontrollable on Amazon. No. Anyway, so Adam, what do you think of this thing?
I mean, when you first told me that, the AI were cheating at chess, I laughed. I just found it funny. Obviously, there are serious implications, and because those serious implications don't affect the world today, I can look at it very lightly. But obviously, massive ramifications if an AI is willing or able to cheat. And humans are also motivated to want to win. So if they're using an AI tool, they may want it to cheat. So, not only does it open up that sort of can of worms unintentionally, but intentionally as well. So, yeah, it's concerning.
To pick up on that last point for a moment, it is the case that many AI models are made safer through the owners, developers making them so.
Yeah.
But you can often undo some of those safety features by a few hours to a few days of fine-tuning in a different way. So it could be that the models do no longer cheat at chess. But then someone's like, hey, if you just run this other program for, half a day, now the model will cheat at chess for you.
Or the game is to cheat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so you can, as Adam just hinting at, there's a much larger problem that even if the models are made safe, it's not that they're necessarily made safe perpetually because they themselves can be hacked to be made less safe, which can then hack other things, which can then make all of us less safe.
Yeah. So yeah, it's concerning, and it's almost funny in an anthropomorphic type of way. It's like, of course they cheat because people cheat.
Yes,
and
they
it's
do.
just like because agents cheat. You know?
They learn from us. But of course, they're cheating in ways which humans almost can't cheat. Right?
No,
that's
not at all.
That's what's kind of impressive about it. Maybe if you were a human hacker, you could cheat in a similar way.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like when people play video games and they'll go in and I'll change the maps data and I'll intercept some packets and whatever. This also reminded me. We covered this on our show. We had a guest, Lee Graham, on ages ago. But basically, when they create a physical world and they have some sort of simulated critters or beings or whatever you're going to call them in them, and they ask them to say get to the finish line faster or whatever, they will often do this completely bizarre things and exploit loopholes in the physics simulation, or he made itself super long just to get to the finish line rather than actually walking there, or so all sorts of odd things like that happen, and that's not even cheating. It's just exploiting. So it's so hard to understand the consequences of what you might be asking for.
Correct. The famous example of the boat race, the electronic boat race game, was in the book, where the system learned that you could have this boat, which is kind of just go around in a circle and accumulate points.
Yeah.
Because the goal was to get points. I'm no, we meant get points by winning, not get points by going in a circle. Well, you didn't say that.
Yeah.
You didn't say that, right? Or it's we want you to play Tetris and not lose, so it just paused the game indefinitely. It's loophole. And so this is where it's very hard to specify the rules. And every time you think you have, wait, one more. And maybe just because you don't see it now, there could be another one lurking in the future. It's very hard to know what you don't know. Well, thank you for joining us once again. Adam showed us that people are probably not psychic. And I showed you that AIs are going to cheat at things. And these things will sadly be true for the near future. Until next time, think better, act better.
Peace out, cuboids.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
What's the
Chess.
chess? Oh, I didn't know about that one.
AI cheating at chess.
Really?
Oh, that's something. Is that funny to you? Why?
I think that's hilarious.
All right.
Oh man,
What strikes you funny is that's why. All right. Can we get some nonverbal kids to play this AI? Uncontrollable on Amazon. No.